All right, welcome back to episode 4 of From the Bunker. Today, I have my friend Staff Sergeant Dane Petiprin, who
Hi.
happened to deploy with myself and the other two bros of the bunker. So we were in Syria together. He was the NCOIC of our aid station and ended up being a cool dude. So we're homies now. So Dane, he has been in the Army National Guard for just over 6 years, enlisted in August of 2017, went to basic in November of 17, graduated from AIT in June of 2018. He is a 68 Whiskey combat medic. So tell us a little bit about why you joined and like at what stage of your life you joined.
So I was in my senior year of getting a bachelor's in physiology up at Northern Michigan University. I think I was at home on spring break and kind of was at this turning point of as much as I liked the idea of being pre-med and going like med school route, I was kind of coming to terms with like I didn't want to be in school for another 8 to 10 years. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I was sitting at, pretty sure it's like the Applebee's in Ludington, with a good friend of mine, and he was in then, he's still in now, and he was basically just like, hey, there's whispers that we might be going to Afghanistan in about 2, 3 years. I know when we were in high school, you kind of thought about joining. Where are you at on it now? And I was kind of, yeah, talk to me in a couple months kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So ended up going on a graduated from Northern, ended up going on a cross country motorcycle trip with my dad after I graduated. And like the whole time he was making jokes like, oh, there's always truck driving school. There's always truck driving school. When because he could kind of tell that I wasn't really feeling the whole med school thing too. We hadn't really talked about it quite yet, but he kept like dropping hints, dad knows. And I was like, well, I'm kind of thinking about enlisting. And he was like, I think he made some joke about not going Marines because I wasn't tough enough for it. So you'd
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that. Um, and I first considered Navy because my grandpa was Navy, so I was thinking corpsman, but I didn't really want to go active at that point, and I didn't really see the point in being like a reserve Navy and going down to Ohio. So Dad and I ended up going on this cross country motorcycle trip right after I graduated, and we hadn't really talked about how I wasn't really feeling med school anymore, I don't think. But he was like dropping hints constantly of like, well, there's always truck driving school. Like, oh, if it doesn't work out, you can always get your CDL. Um, and so, side note though, don't take an 883 Roadster all the way to San Diego. Your seat, the
Ouch.
foam will eventually compact, and every mile goes straight up your coccyx. So don't do it.
Oh,
It's a bad time. My dad was on a Dyna Low 1350. His old bones also not having a good time because he was a solid frame mount, whereas I had like the rubber mount. Uh, but
dude,
that's neither here
I
nor
get
there.
no. We got to stop and talk about motorcycles for a second. Come on. Let's see. I did 798 miles on a Fat Boy one day, so I haven't hit the 1,000. But that was an '05 Fat Boy with a stock seat. I mean, it sucked. But
Yeah.
dude, you run an '83 Sportster
Yeah, the Roadster edition, but yeah, an 883
Roadster.
Roadster.
Wow. And your dad was on a what year Dyna?
Oh man, like a 96, I want to say. I don't remember the year, but it's a 1350 Dyna Low.
Dude,
Um, yeah.
ouch.
And we had like 80% of our gear was for like camping, but
Uh
our whole trip we were like riding this freak heat wave that was going through the whole country. So we never camped out once. He had worked, so he works home care as a nurse and he'll stay in hotels. And so he used like all of his hotel reward points throughout the trip. So we
huh.
never
Uh
once stayed like in our tents. And like 80% of our gear was for tent camping on the trip. But yeah, it was like exactly 3 weeks. We ended up spending 2 extra nights in Vegas because he won a like a drop-in poker tournament. So we
Uh-huh.
spent, I think, a total of 3 nights in Vegas. And then we got to Denver, and we didn't really appreciate how Denver isn't actually in the Rockies. It's
Yeah.
like in the plains. And so
Yep.
we started riding, and I think we got to Nebraska. So I think we stopped in Lincoln, and then we rode all the way from Lincoln to Muskegon in one day, and it was like 900 miles because we were just over it at that point. Like we were just sore, we were tired,
You did
and
900 miles in a day on that bike.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. We ended up
How?
stopping at a hotel at like 2 a.m. We were only an hour from home, but we didn't want to smoke a deer on 31, so we just got a hotel for the night.
Dude, I I like 500 in a day is pretty average for me. Like an 8 hour day, you stop, relax, on a road glide. Well, last time I did it was on a street glide, do the same thing. But that's pretty hardcore, dude.
I won't do it again.
Uh,
Like I used to be
yeah.
like if the roads were clear, I didn't care how much snow was on like the side of the road. I was on my bike. And now it's like, it's a little windy, the bike's pretty light, it's probably best I just drive the truck. So I definitely changed my riding habits.
Yeah, I used to ride. I mean, I was in SoCal, so it's only so cold. But when I had my sporty and even my fat boy, dude, it'd be like riding through the desert, maybe high 30s or something, low
Hmm.
40s, and you're like, whatever, dude. And you're just like pretty miserable, but it feel really alive at the same time. But I would say to anyone listening to this, go get a motorcycle and ride. I mean, I said this at the end of our second episode that like faith in motorcycles, and then my wife was like, "What about me?" So let me just remind everyone that she's awesome too. But yeah, those things like they just get me through, and like I got to ride yesterday because it was so nice.
Hmm.
Late February in Michigan, it made my day. I'll probably be happy for a week. So uh, get out there and ride. So you might even end up going on a road trip with your dad, and I'm gonna guess this turns into this is when you go sign up, right?
Yeah, so basically told him like this is something I want to do, and he just kind of was like, like at this like it's your decision to make. Um, and I think he kind of like took solace in that I was like, oh, I'm gonna go National Guard, but then like behind the scenes, he didn't realize that I was like on the fault, like what turned out to be a false promise of Afghanistan.
Uh
Um,
huh.
but anyway, so I got to MEPS, and I was a very thick boy. I drank a lot of IPAs up at Northern. So I weighed in at like, I want to say it was like 250. And that was only because the night before, I only drank about 8 ounces of water the day prior. I ate one Nature Valley granola bar, and I wrapped my stomach in saran wrap to sweat more off than like the night going into MEPS.
And how tall are you?
I'm only 5'9.5".
Oh boy.
I was 5'11" on Tinder back in the day. But
All
so I
right,
ended
so
up
you get
stepping
to
on this.
MEPS.
What's that?
Were were you were you already set on going in as a combat medic
Yeah,
already? Or,
yeah.
okay.
I that was the only thing I was gonna do. Actually, when I was at the armory, I was like, oh, I want to be a 6.8 whiskey in the 126, and the first recruiter is like, I'm not seeing that on here, but you've got a really good ASVAB. How about cybersecurity? I was like, I don't think you heard me when I said 6.8 whiskey in the 126. And so, he walks out. Oh, let me go ask someone. And 10 minutes later, all of a sudden there's a spot built for me.
hmm
And so, yeah, head down to MEPS, weigh in at 250. And the guy asked me, he's like, you don't plan on going Marines, do you? And I was just like, Army National Guard. And he's like, dude, you're going to fit right in. um, so yeah, that was my MEP story. Besides, everyone's got to bend over and spread them. Um,
On
for
duck walk.
there's
So
always the creepy old guy.
yeah, so you get through basic training and all that, and you get to your unit. Then what?
So first thing is I get there in June. XCTC is the very first drill that I have. So I get handed like two duffels of gear, and I was like, "What do I need?" And they're like, "Whatever you want, man." I was like, well, that doesn't really help me. Um,
This
and
is the
so
guard. It's all good, dude.
yeah, it's just like whatever you think you need, just take it. I was like, all right. Um,
No.
so ended up
Can I
went
just
out
say
into the
that's a
what's that?
immediate failure by your leadership to not give you packing list?
I mean, they probably also didn't know I was going to be there because it was my first drill. Like, I probably just showed up and like, who's this guy?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so just go out to the field. I mean, I had a really good time. I think we only moved our BAS like two or three times. Um, the OCs, even though we weren't like part of the game, they came up to us one day like, you guys don't have any like defensive measures. So we dug this like 4 foot bunker, and we took two pine trees and like cut them and put it next to it. So we basically made like this pine tree pillbox out of spite. And so that was the pine tree megastructure, as we called it. Um,
Nice.
so that was, yeah, that was 28. Yeah, so that was summer 2018. Um, and at the end of that is when they like said, "Hey, we've got the NASC orders um, to mobilize." And so my first drill was like the first day of announcing. So the timeline of like talking to my buddy, actually going and enlisting, getting to the
Wow.
unit, it was yeah, just one thing fell right in place with another.
Nice. All right. So that's moving pretty fast.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, it's everything I dreamed of. It's exactly what I signed up for. What's that turn into?
I mean, it really for the first portion it was because I was pretty like content on mobilizing when I right from the get go.
Mhm.
So we ended up picking up a few like week, couple day stints of like Guardian Angel training. I did field SAN. I did medic coverage for SAW E. Uh, so I was picking up all these orders left and right just to keep myself busy. Ended up going back to Northern um, in January 2019 for prereqs for the nursing program. Because like, well, just in case we lose the mission, I want to have something lined up.
Mhm.
So get accepted in the nursing program, and everyone all the time. I'm sure leadership, above knows like, hey, like the check's been cashed, they're going somewhere. But
Yeah.
at our level, it's like, oh well, it's not official yet. Like we know we're doing something, but we don't know what the whole time. So there I am, like assuming everything's going to fall apart, and at least I got my nursing program lined up. Well, that doesn't happen, and we find ourselves down at Moab, and the day we land was the first day that COVID mitigation started in the U.S. Army. So we
Wow.
landed at Moab site, everyone's phone comes off airplane mode, and it's like United States Army announces, whatever COVID-19 measures, and that just began a whole cluster of its own.
Did did you have to do anything special while you're training to
Oh yeah.
go on a deployment as a medic? Do you have to do a whole bunch of extra stuff because of COVID?
So as far as medics go, I think all we had to maybe do was like one or two online trainings
Oh,
on
okay.
like COVID probably. I don't remember really being there wasn't anything really too much that came out specific to that as far as training goes. Um,
I mean, like procedures, like hey, medics, go through everyone's barracks and make sure they're this or that or
oh,
anything.
they that was kind of like a squad kind of platoon task
Okay.
but essentially what happened was each bay became like its own group, and so your pod, and so you weren't supposed to
Hmm.
interact with the other pods. And they put engineer tape around the barracks here at Camp McGregor, and so they put engineer tape around our area because
Hmm.
another unit showed up to mobilize soon after.
Hmm.
But the highlight was we first went there on Title 32 for our AT leading into our Title 10. And so while
Okay.
we were Title 32, we couldn't use the chow hall. And so they catered Golden Corral for us. So we were
Dude.
eating Golden Corral like 100 feet from the chow hall because our orders weren't on the right bill.
So, so for those who don't know that are listening, Title 32 is your state active orders, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And then Title 10 is when you're on federal active orders. So then you can do all the full-time Army stuff. But since you're like, oh, you're getting paid by the state right now, yeah, we can't feed you
Hmm.
because government.
Yep.
Makes sense. It's not like the state could just be like, here's the money, feed them.
And I don't think we were doing like the whole 6 foot thing yet at that point. Um, but as time went on, like, was it First Army and Fifth Armor or First Armor and Fifth Army? I can't, it's First and Fifth of something,
Mm-hmm.
for like the OCs. Like they were all just like kind of figuring out as they went on like how they wanted to do this. So it went from just like hang out with your group and kind of keep away from everyone else to you can only go to the PX if we walk you there. And so we were being walked in like groups of like 8 or 10. And I think we had mass at this point, to go down and like go through the PX. And it was just it's like you want to be mad at them, but they also like woke up one day and were like, "Oh man, like like what the hell am I supposed to do with this?"
Mm-hmm.
So like in the moment, like everyone just hated them. Looking back, it's like I wouldn't have been ready for that shit either. Um,
Yeah.
but it got really fun once we got to JRTC because at that point it was still kind of like the stick with your pod thing, but we were doing like notional fly to advise with an SFAB unit that we were supposed to mob with. And so during that, whenever we were mingling with them, we had to wear cravats as like a tactical mask, our eye pro, and gloves, like tactical gloves, not like rubber gloves that are like non-permeable, just like our
Yeah.
tactical gloves. And it's Fort Polk. It's Oh man, I can't remember what time it was in the summer. It's like summer or fall. Yeah, because we got there in Bahrain in July, so it was June, May and June of down at Fort Polk, and you're in full kit, and then you've got this cravat and these eye pro that are fogging up, and you're somehow supposed to like identify threats in their room while you're just like struggling to survive, like inside your own little world.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That makes actually identifying threats a lot easier.
when you can't see them.
Yeah, you're like, oh, look, I can see now. That's cool. So yeah, the army makes everything miserable. So when did you? So you're training up, and you're supposed to be going to Afghanistan, right?
Yeah, and so at this point, still we're at JRTC. Mind you, we've been on orders now for pretty much a full year, or we've been in the process, like the mode process, for like a full year now.
Mm-hmm.
And they bring us all into like a formation, and like, hey guys, so like no shit, there we were, put in like labels on the shipping containers, and for some reason these labels say Qatar. And we're like, well, why do they say Qatar? And they try to play it as like they didn't know we lost the mission. It was the shipping labels that gave it away.
Oh yeah.
And so now everyone's just like, so are we going home? And like, no, no, half of you are still going. Because simultaneously during the whole mode process, they're like weeding us down. So like Sam, she knew before we got to JRTC that they
Sam.
weren't.
Sam is Dane's wife.
Yeah, for those
Everyone.
that don't know, my
Yeah.
waifu was then my fiance, cosmetics fraternize. It's just what we do. So she knew once we were at Moab down in Texas that she wasn't going forward, but they still
Okay.
had like a almost like a rear D support group come to JRTC. So she was helping with JRTC even though she knew she wasn't going forward. The rest of
Mm-hmm.
us were still like on this pipe dream of Afghanistan. And then 2 or 3 days before we're supposed to hop on a flight, it's, hey, the shipping labels say Qatar, so I guess that's just where we're going.
Oh, so they sent everyone to Qatar.
yeah,
that's
everyone
going.
that went forward first went to Qatar, and we're like, well, what are we gonna do once we get there? And I was like, await further orders. All right.
Well, did
Uh,
it before Qatar? Didn't some of you split off
Yeah, so
and go
like
down to the
roughly
border and
half,
help?
yeah, like roughly half, maybe a little bit more, went to like mostly in El Paso area.
Okay.
Um, so some of them had already left when we were at Texas, but
Mm-hmm.
another smaller group came to JRTC to support that, and then the rest of them. So
Yep.
they got like bus from Texas to what was it, Louisiana, right? Fort
Yeah.
Cole, yeah. And then they had to bus all the way back to do their orders in El Paso.
Huh.
So they were really happy about that. They got to stop at a Bucky's though, so you take the good with the bad.
Yeah, I still haven't ever been to one, but I'll check that off the list someday. So you get to Qatar, then what?
So at that point, everyone that was like, "Oh, we're going to the Air Force when it's going to be super cool," it was, all things considered. We were the only unit there that couldn't drink, but that was closed down up until like the last week we were there. So we were there for about 2 months. Um, but most of the guys were just tanning. Like all the grunts were there just sunbathing. There's an outdoor pool. There's an indoor pool. There's a CrossFit gym. Um, there were two there were two chow halls towards the end because it's like 1 mile to walk to the chow hall each way, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
130 in a day. But like, boohoo, you've got maybe two people in your room and an AC unit and a mini fridge. So,
So
you know,
it's GTL time,
what's what's
gym tan lunch.
oh yeah, yeah, pretty much. Um, for the medics, though, most of us end up getting some kind of task. So, like, some helped with quarantine barracks areas. I think we had one helping out in their like role one-ish two. It's basically like sick call, but they also had a few like diagnostic things, like they had dental and stuff like that in place. And then I was the only one working with the Air Force for what it was called the Blood Transshipment Center. And so our mission was any whole blood products that went anywhere in CENTCOM, we received and then distroed out. So just
Okay.
a small ragtag group. There was five of us total, so me and then four Air Force personnel. We worked at night just because it was cooler, and I think like the aircraft just out of preference, it's easier to take off when it's only like 100 than like 130, 140 on the tarmac just for like lift.
Yeah.
So everything we did was at night, and that's when I learned that banana chips are fried, and when you eat 2 packs of them a night, you gain 15 pounds in 2 months. So, yeah,
They're not. You would think there's dehydrated or
yeah, I
something.
just thought they were dehydrated bananas. Like I thought I was doing the right thing by eating banana chips in my free time. And then like one day I was like, I should like, because I was at this point I could run like 6 miles. So I was running
Mm-hmm.
like 4 to 6 miles every couple nights. Never gave it any thought. And then like one day's like, I wonder what I'm scaling up to right now. And it was 15 pounds that I
Wow.
gained, and I was like, that's not good. And then I checked, like I finally read the label. And it's like, oh, there's like 1,000 calories in each one of these bags.
It took, wow, it took you that long to read the label, dude.
But trust me with
Man.
narcotics, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So, that deployment, anything else interesting about that one besides being
um,
hot?
yeah, besides it being hot, got to Bahrain. Did a couple months as security forces there. It was kind of like you basically got deputized. Deputies. We can.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's.
We'll talk about that later.
um, so just did that for a couple months, and then working with their role one with a bunch of corpsmen and stuff, and just like small world, which anyone that's in realizes how small the military world actually is. And one
Hmm.
of the corpsmen there was actually like 3 grades ahead of me in high school, and like
Oh,
we
wow.
didn't like really know each other much, but Facebook just because we are like in proximity or whatever in quarantine, it's like, oh, like this mutual friend. It's like, well, that's weird. Like, why would they be showing me this? And they're like, oh, it's because they're here in Bahrain right now. So yeah, other than that, it was just worked sick call. Nothing cool happened there, fortunately. And yeah, eventually got home. Sam was doing her thing in Texas, and even though she was a specialist, and I had my five at this point, she actually made more than me because of per diem, because we didn't get any
Mm,
per diem besides I think like a couple dollars a week for like laundry, even though it was free. But the IRS doesn't need to know that.
yeah.
Um,
Now they do.
yeah. And yeah, she made like 15 grand in per diem. She had her own hotel room the whole time. Yeah, she was living the dream.
Nice. All right, so you get home from that. What year did you get home?
So we got home, that would have been 2021. Yeah, 2020 to 21, I believe we were gone. So we got back like
And you're
March.
both 126. So for anyone who doesn't know, there's two infantry battalions in Michigan. There's 126 and the 125. So you get home. How did you end up in the 125 and on deployment with me and the boys?
So when I had taken my five, it was with the 1171st, which is a medical company area support MCAS. And so
Okay.
the whole time I was mobilized, I was actually an 1171st E5, but the DMD orders have been cut. So I stayed with the 126 for the MOB.
Okay.
Got home, reported to them, ended up doing best warrior, best NCO, got first in that for the
So you won
state.
the state of Michigan
Yeah,
as an
which
NCO?
which sounds cool, but because of COVID, they canceled the first date for it when there was like 30 of us that were supposed to be there, and
Uh
then three of us ended up showing up to the
huh.
next date. So I
I
felt
won
like,
the gold medal.
yeah.
Oh, the three dudes.
So I felt like I kind of like like the guy that got second, especially, he was pretty high speed, and it
Mm-hmm.
shows because the PAO, the public affairs guy, taking all the photos, like they were all of that guy. Because if you were to like
Uh
look
huh.
at the two of us, like that dude's gonna win. Like that's
Yeah.
the horse I'm betting on, and I
Uh
was
huh.
like way off in the stable still. Um, so, yeah, I got first in that, and then what kind of like makes me feel like I actually was worthy of it is I ended up getting second at regionals in
Oh,
Minnesota later on. So that was kind of like
okay.
my okay, maybe I kind of do know like basic level 10 tasks like I thought.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'm familiar with that process. I mean, not to be biased or anything, but I think anyone who served with me in the California Guard knows that my boy Ortiz, who I totally need to bring on here, he won the state of California, which is a lot of dudes
Yeah.
and girls. He won soldier, not NCO,
Hmm.
but he was like a 10th Mountain active guy in a Pathfinder unit, which I don't think those units are still around. Did an Afghanistan tour, left active, came to the Guard, and he was high speed, dude, and he was motivated. And we were on orders one summer, like switching over to strikers, and then they needed some. We were going to move armories, so they needed some people to be on orders, and he was going to do the best warrior. And I was like, I didn't really have a great job at the time. I was like, I'll go on orders. I'll train him while we're moving the armories. And like, it wasn't really me training him as, I mean, I'd been in longer, so I helped him a bit, but
Hmm.
just help him practice because he was moto and he knew a lot of stuff and he was in great shape and like he prepared for it and he
Hmm.
won. And then for regionals, he goes to New Mexico. And the dude, like, they had like a couple days to acclimatize to like some insanely high elevation.
Yeah.
And the dude who won was from there.
Yeah, the same
So
thing
like,
kind of happened with us. The guy that won was from Minnesota, and they put him on a
uh,
week of ADOS orders to
mm,
prep for the competition. And so
yeah,
I was having to YouTube the how to do how to employ the AT4. So like the
uh
night before that skill, I was watching a YouTube
huh.
video on how to use an AT4.
Dang, dang, dude. Yeah, I know. Like, if a little prep. Oh, and a lot of people don't realize this. Speaking of like competitions, and National Guard, a lot of National Guard people win these. Like, I would have to look at statistics for like best ranger or whatever, but like sniper
Yeah,
competitions and a
sniper's
lot of
huge
these
for especially
competitions.
Michigan. The sniper team always does great.
Yeah, so like, because the guards like, yeah, that's your job right now. Whenever you go to drill, or we'll put you on orders, and that's all you do. Or these
Hmm.
active guys have to play the active duty game while trying to prep, and so a lot of times it gives the guard people an advantage.
Hmm.
So I thought that pretty interesting. So that's pretty cool. So your motto, you've been to a lot of schools as a medic. Some didn't have to do with being a medic, and then you win best warrior for the state, go to regionals, get second, and then yeah. So you get to how'd you get in 125?
So a couple months after regionals, I was sitting outside at Fort Custer on a drill weekend with 1171st, and someone was talking about like, oh hey, it sounds like they're kind of opening up the DMD to people outside the unit at this point. And I was like,
Okay.
well, I'll do it. And so initially, I had just volunteered for the MOB just to attach and mobilize, and then come back. And
Mm-hmm.
once I got there, I hit up like the admin guys back at Lumsday first, like, hey, like, I'm thinking of just making this a permanent thing. Is that still on the books? And so my attachment turned into a transfer over time, like while I was there. But yeah, I showed
Okay.
up probably 3 or 4 months before we actually went on like PPMT, that annual training. So I only showed up. I think we went to Grayling like the first drill weekend I was there, um, maybe two more times, and then it was boom right into AT. And for that, we were so new of like a crew that they're kind of like, hey, don't worry too much about like the tactics because our AT was more of like a like scheme and maneuver kind of AT. It wasn't like a base defense and operations like scheme.
Yep.
So we just focused on just like whiskey sustainment. So like every year or every 2 years, you have to renew your NREMT basic. That's part of the requirement for the MOS. So we knocked out a lot of that training.
What
Um,
is that? What does that acronym mean?
Nationally registered EMT basic.
Okay.
So that was one of the things like corpsman versus medic is
Mm-hmm.
even though corpsmen do their school is like 4 months of hospitalman and then they can go green side. For army medics, for combat medics, you have like one day of like this is how a hospital looks, and then it's like slide two, this is the cat tourniquet. Um,
Oh,
yeah, so we go straight
I
into
didn't know that.
yeah, it's we so what a corpsman would do for Greenside, that's basically
Mm-hmm.
all a 6 to 8 whiskey does. Your first 2 months, you get the NRMT basic, and then your like green side, your green phase is the combat medic school. So there's no hospitalman portion. It's NREMT basic, which a corpsman can apply to test for, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not part of the MOS. So if you don't earn your EMT basic, you get reclassed, and there's about a 30 to 40% reclass rate, which is each cycle.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know any of that.
Yeah, it's a recycle or reclass, but you only graduate with about 60% of the people you started with. And actually, on
Mm-hmm.
day one, they do the classic like look to your left, look to your right. One of you won't be here.
Yeah.
And then you get to the
That's
end and you're like, oh shit, like, where is that guy? And then it's like, oh yeah, he got reclass, dude. Um,
dude. That's that's crazy, man.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a tangent. Where were we? Oh yeah, MOB.
Yeah.
So 125 MOB. The only excitement we really had during that AT was there was a heat cat, and they weren't like an active like oh my god like we need to get this guy out of here. But it sounds like when they asked the medic what should we do, he was like oh yeah we should probably just get him out of here. But he meant like just off the like lane and like somewhere to like relax, and that
Yeah.
turned into like hopping on the range control radio of like clear net, we need like an urgent medevac. And
Ah,
so we like
yeah.
heard that over the radio from the aid station, and so I grabbed another NCO and one of the medics, and we just grabbed like ice packs and just like made a beeline for the HLZ to meet them to try and like cool the person while we waited for the helicopter. So I
Mm-hmm.
got to pop some red smoke. That was, you know, super hooah. And like bring the bird
Oh, you
in. But
said the word.
what's
Oh,
that? Say, said the
you
word.
you said the word, dude.
Yeah, man, you got to. Uh, yeah, so like the helicopter's coming in, the high back with the guy like pulls in, and we're like, hey, like which one? And like when we open up the back of it, they all look at us, and like we're expecting to like see someone like seizing on the bed of this Humvee, and like,
Uh-huh.
who's the he cat? And he was like, I am. Like what? And so dust off had already landed, and I was like,
Wow.
"Hey, do you still want this guy?" And they're like, "Ah, we're already here." And so they just like took him for a ride, dropped him off at the Roll Two, which was actually my old unit, the 1171st.
Mm-hmm.
And so they of course like called me and they're like, "Hey man, like, do you like not know what a heat casualty looks like?" um, yeah, that's about it for AT. And yeah, we got what like our 3 or 4 days a leave, you know, every couple of weeks. Once we got back to the armories, and then um, Sam and I like geared up and ready to go.
Yeah, so uh all right. What what was so you and I talked a lot in deployment, so you know, uh for those that don't know, I was like the mayor of our little fob, and Dane was the NCOIC of our aid station. And so we were at, at meetings every day together, and he'd always like tell me his AC's broken or the plumbing's broken, and I'd have to
One of
like,
the 9 ACs that I had.
yeah, dude, it's only 72 in here. It needs to be 68. So, and then I'd go get our local national contractor and try to, use pointing and like the 5 words they know and get it figured out. But uh, now what was it like? You're dealing with all of us goobers over there, all the soldiers, and uh, pretty much all Army there, yeah. A couple Air Force, whatever. Then you got civilians. Did you ever have to help out like the civilian contractors and stuff?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Um,
and then you got the Syrian Democratic Forces too. So we had all that going on. Tell us about that.
so you guys, as far as US, you kept us very busy after everyone wanted to pet Lucy as it warmed up, and she was bathing in the
Mm.
poo pond.
Oh
And
yes,
Noro like put the whole base on their ass for like three
I remember
weeks.
that.
So
Yeah.
fun.
So
You go
Lucy
ahead.
was Lucy was a dog that if you follow Foxhole Friends on Instagram, she's on there quite a bit. But she was a Doberman. She was cool. She's probably not the sharpest dog, but she's running around. It's nice to have something to pet. And there was like a poo pond at the end of the base, and one day she decided it was hot and she was gonna jump in there. And then she ran around and everyone pet her and everyone got neurovirus and very sick.
Um,
We had like we had to go put I was running the mortar section and we were
mhm.
the mayor's cell and doing all like unloading convoys and just doing all kinds of stuff around the base. And they're like, hey, we're gonna need some guys to stand guard. Like everyone was sick. That was bad, dude.
Um, but the highlight to me, like during that whole Noro thing, was at one point the ODA. We had a really good relationship with ODA there.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of their deltas came over and he's like, "Hey, we're going up to this other spot. Is there anything you guys need?" Which they like always ask, and you never want to say yes because like they're already doing so much for us. Like anytime they would just bring us stuff, like be it snacks or equipment. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like you don't want to ask for something because they're already doing stuff for you. But one
Yeah.
day, one of the deltas like, "Hey, we're going. Do you guys need anything?" I was like, "Man, this is gonna sound really dumb, but I need Pepto." And he's like, what? I was like, I need Pepto-Bismol as much as you can get. I need it. Like this base depends on you getting me Pepto. Because at this point, like I was like, because everyone's like, well, why can't I just take loperamide? Which like stop basically shuts everything down as far as like bowel movements go. And but
Okay.
that's just going to hold everything in. So like whatever virus or bacteria you have, it's just going to fester even worse. So we weren't.
Hmm.
I maybe gave that out to like two people the whole 8.5 9 months we were there, and
Okay.
so we were giving people like 2 tabs of Pepto if they had a patrol. Like if you were in the tower, or like if you were staying on base and there was going to be like a chance for you to make it to a toilet, like we didn't have enough Pepto to give you any. We were like, here's a like we could give you an
Patrols only.
IV, like we could give you an IV, we could give you a drip drop, um, but Pepto, like probably not. Like sorry, but no. So yeah, that's when I knew it was bad when I was asking Special Forces operators, "Can I have Pepto, please? Pretty please."
Did they deliver?
He was able to get one box,
Uh,
and
oh, a
but there's
whole box? That's not bad.
well there was like 30 tabs in it, which is like enough for like
Oh, like
eight
a
to
little box.
yeah. And he's like, "This is all I could get, man." And I was like, "Dude, you just like bought us like at least 36 hours like of base defense." So
Dang.
yeah, that
Did
was
you,
bad.
were you able to get it like flown in from anywhere or anything?
Eventually, the thing that came like instantly was all the sandy wipes that I made you guys like come and pick up and like
Oh,
dish her
yeah.
out those sanitization wipes. Those
Yeah.
RLZ had plenty of them, and so
Hmm.
those came down like in the next G lock. Um, but Pepto, we would order meds. Like let's say my Benadryl is expiring in 6 months, and
Hmm.
Um, Sam is like was awesome. She weaponized her OCD, and the whole stock room was like medication expiration, and like common use. Like she had this thing organized in. So if
Wow.
something expired in like 3 to 6 months, she would order ahead of time, and we would
Hmm.
get stuff that was from like that same batch. So we'd be like, "Hey, we're ordering this because it expires in March," and then we would
Uh-huh.
receive something from that same exact package. So that was always fun. But after like I called, I can't remember, I think it was somewhere in Iraq. Called them a couple times, and I was like, "Hey, if you could like stop sending us the stuff we already have, that'd be great." And they were like, "Oh, we didn't know we were doing that." Like, okay, sure. So after an angry phone call or two, things got straightened out pretty well. A couple times we had stuff airdrop or brought in by Strad Air, but it
Hmm.
was largely like G-Lock stuff. So I got to come on down and hang out with you for a little while.
Yeah. What about, all right. Are you comfortable talking about real injuries?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'll leave out the names and the mechanisms because remember, some of those things didn't happen. The event
Yeah.
happened, but the way we think they happened didn't happen.
Yeah. But, yeah, like just dealing with actual injuries in a hostile environment that didn't happen from tripping and falling.
Yeah.
What's
Um,
I wasn't like it wasn't a whole bunch or anything, obviously, but like
yeah.
how was that injury? What's that like to actually have to turn it on? Like, were you ever an EMT back home first?
So I'd worked in an emergency department the 4 years I was going to get my bachelor's.
Okay.
But I never worked like on the road on a rig. At
Okay.
that point, Sam had worked I think about 6 years in an ER that had a trauma, like a trauma center to it. We had
Okay.
another paramedic with us. And then all but one of our medics had some civilian experience. And the one that didn't, it was just no fault of her own. She enlisted right out of high school and hopped out of Moab. So it's not like she was slacking off or anything. Um, so everyone brought a lot of experience to the plate. And
Nice.
so when we had our first, we'll say it was the eye injury, but we won't say how it happened because a lot of people are going to be laughing if we do. So we had our eye injury. At that point, we had done like training. like Monday through Saturday, we were doing some kind of white space. Like we
Mhm.
blocked off 2 hours in the day because if we weren't going to be on KP, if we weren't going to be on towers, like we owed it to you guys to stay on top of our shit. And
Yeah.
so because of our experience and because of these like white space trainings, we knew all of the individual pieces of what we needed to do. And we had a couple like minor and like priority casualties, injured or really sick that we had flown out. Um, and so we had all the steps in place. We weren't
Mhm.
ready for somebody to walk in holding their eye and now it's go time. Like now it's this is an urgent like life limb eyesight. Like this is the real deal. Here we
Mhm.
go. And so we did good. Like all, and I say we actually, one of the deltas came over and actually did like a surgical procedure to help save this person's eye.
Mhm.
Um, and so we did everything right individually, but we could have done it better as like a whole. Like the bed that they sat on was like that little sit call bed that we had in the corner because
Yeah.
we just thought like, oh, they probably like it's probably a cut under their eye because that's how it always like that's what it always is. And
Yeah.
so we like kind of started off rough with that. And then I dropped the 9 line, but as like air was coming to us, that's when we started doing the procedure. And
Mhm.
so I was like, hey, go down, refuel, come back, and then we'll bounce. Well, they landed, hopped in the truck to like ask us how we were doing. They're like, can you give us 5 minutes? And they're like, no, we gotta go get fuel. And like what the hell? Like that's what we talked about. Um, so all of these things that went wrong, like all happened at the same time, but overall, all the things that needed to go right did. So as far
Mhm.
as like the care went, the patient care was fine. How we got from A to like F just looked really bad. um,
Yeah.
it looked rough. And so we ended up doing, I say we, but the lead Delta, 18 Delta that was there, which 18 Delta is the ODA version of combat medics. So they really fall under an 11 or yeah, 11 Bravo or 18. I don't know what the OD. It's an 18 series, so they get like if they get a CIB instead of a CMB because they are like a infantryman first, a medic second. But
Okay.
so they're a paramedic, and then they also do um, a like surgical crash course
Oh wow.
of like field medicine and prolonged medicine, all these super cool things. And so their
Mhm.
school is it's like 2 years in total just to get to that point of being an 18 Delta. Um,
Wow.
so we basically sat down like a Monday through Friday from like 9 to 4 of like, hey, these are the things we did right, but here's how we can do it better. And so we did like a straight up like 40-hour week of how to not look ate up ever again.
Mhm.
And that really set the tone for us in like actual quality training, how to like turn your little combat medic into like a like that's Doc, kind of
Yeah.
thing. Just to kind of like summarize it all up in the gist. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, you have
and
to those guys get so many reps all the time
mhm,
because they have the funding assets time like put together for them to be what the army needs them to be.
mhm,
And you know, we are always trying to scrap and make do and adapt and overcome, the rest of
mhm.
us. And so that's really amazing experience that you guys got to work with them the way things were set up there. And I mean, I remember you guys doing those trainings that we would bring everyone else, like the medics from the line, and
Mhm.
then your CLS guys,
Yep.
combat lifesavers, and training all that was. I watched you guys. That was really good stuff, man.
Yeah, and like a lot of it is we knew the basics. Like we knew how to do the stuff, but to really apply the critical thinking of not only what
Hmm.
you're doing, but why you're doing it and the best way to do it.
Yeah.
If we didn't have the ODA there, we wouldn't have gotten to the level that we did. Um,
Yeah.
so when the big thing did happen,
Mm-hmm.
and we hear one unstable at CCP, I can't remember what it was anymore, but
Yeah.
there wasn't even any hesitation. Like everyone went to their predetermined spot. Like everyone was ready. I didn't have to say
Nice.
anything. We got our accountability, which is pretty easy to do when you live inside a nice little concrete fortress, and everyone
Yeah,
has
but
their
the steps were in place. Everyone followed them. You're ready to
yeah.
go.
And so yeah, we were just ready to go, and it was like looking back, it's just really cool to see we were like a good group of medics, and then we like turned into this role one that could actually like do the stuff a role one's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so it's just really cool to see like all come to fruition, which it's unfortunate that we had a defining moment where it all came to fruition. Um,
Yeah.
but we got fortunate for how bad things could have been. It wasn't that, it wasn't really that bad. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It all worked out, and you got a lot of experience out of it that you can pass down through, really the Michigan National Guard for the rest of your career.
yeah.
So that's really awesome, and it's always a good feeling when you handle things the right way. It's funny being in the military. Like your job is to be prepared for like the worst moments in life, and it's weird because you're like glad that you got to do it,
Hmm.
and that's like what you sign up for, to be involved in terrible situations.
Yeah.
And then you're like, yeah, we did it. But it's always it's like someone's expense, whether it's your enemy or your guys or whatever. But I don't know. It's I don't know if people who like don't join can understand that, or maybe everyone can. I don't know, but it's weird to. Is it weird? I don't know.
I mean, especially like for like the traditionally like the CMB, the combat medic badge,
Mm-hmm.
you only the regs have changed a little bit, but for the most part, like you only get that if you have a U.S. casualty. So if you see
Yeah.
someone wearing a CIB, depending on where they got that and like the GWAT, what the reg was, maybe they were in
Yeah.
direct engagement, maybe it was IDF. In Vietnam, it was you had to be in 3 direct engagements.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it just gets, the reg change as we go. But for a CMB, like chances are that person's friend like got hurt.
Yeah.
And so that's especially like coming in like into later period of the GWAT in 2017, 2018. Any of our instructors that had a CMB on, like you just assumed like they've seen the absolute like worst of humanity, basically. Um,
Yeah. That's really interesting. I don't know if you listened to our episode 3 that came out Tuesday yet, but they were talking about how regulation has changed, if it should, for like CABs and CIBs and all that. So
mhm,
it's interesting that we're talking about that now too. It's they kind of they're saying like, it kind of has to because war has changed,
mhm,
which I agree too. But it's also like you don't want to just give them out. So I don't know. We were talking too about how uh like the little bit of combat I saw in my first deployment, even though I saw my buddies get hurt, luckily they all survived, but
mhm.
was like not as like driving around and then just maybe getting hit by an IED or like someone like pop shotting at you or something is different than like crazy, like not just regular indirect fire, but
Yeah.
like the stuff that happened that one night that was different, man.
Mhm.
Like I would rather get shot at any day, or I'd probably rather drive around with the threat of IEDs too. I mean, those suck, dude. I spent 3 deployments just driving around. Like, okay, well, today might be the day.
Mhm.
And you're like, I just hope it's fast and I don't like survive and it's nasty. I mean, I don't know. It's been an interesting it's been interesting, like almost 20 years for me,
Hmm.
in this type of war. And then you feel like you don't even compare to these guys in Vietnam and stuff.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, they had to get in 3 ticks just to get a CIB, and you're like, dude, it's not like that for me. But
Hmm.
then some people went to Afghanistan and like were fighting the Taliban and straight up, you know, real ticks all the time. So it's just all the experiences vary so much in GWAT, it seems like. But
I mean,
maybe we should have some more Vietnam guys on and find out if there was a huge difference for them too. But yeah, it's very interesting how things have changed yet maybe stayed the same.
even for us, like we were in like our little apartment essentially when we got
Mm-hmm.
hit. And so, we felt the ground, like there's popcorn on the ground and we could hear the
Mm-hmm.
thuds, but we weren't in the tent having shit, coming through it, hot embers. So even on the same base, like it's almost like I don't, the only reason why I feel as if we like earned our CMBs is because we took care of like a combat casualty, like exactly what we trained to do. But
Right.
even my experience of the IDF doesn't compare to someone that was 200 feet away from me.
Well, yeah, and then my experience on the farther side of the base doesn't compare with the guys who where it was landing like right on them.
Hmm.
I just hear it getting closer and
Yeah,
closer in
yeah.
the tent, and I'm like, okay, we need to go and get in the bunker.
As in the
But
movies, everything would have been black by now, and my ears should be ringing.
well, I can say that we hit an ID my first deployment, and it is like the movies, dude.
Hmm.
Like everything's like, and it like I swear, I guess your adrenaline hits so hard that everything slows down, and the fog of war is like a real
Hmm.
thing. So like I could vividly remember looking at the other guys in the back of the Humvee and like, what do we do now? We like looked at each other, and like it was probably a few seconds, and then your training kicks in because I was active duty Marines, and like we just train, 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 train,
Hmm.
so you know what to do. And like, and they're like, okay, at that time it was stop, get out, set up security, and assess the situation. So we all just stop, spread out in the middle of Fallujah, get security at this intersection, and then see what happened, and then carry on. But like, uh, yeah, it's it's definitely like the way that a lot of movies do that is very accurate. I
Hmm.
found out. So, but yeah, it was huge difference in experiences depending on where you were at, just on our little base.
Yeah.
So yeah, then we were, like we had like run out to the mortar firing position, like yeah, we're probably gonna mess someone up. Like yeah, it's not in your range anyways. So
We're gonna take a commercial break. Sam, do you want to say hi to the world? For those wondering, the Sam that I mentioned, this is her finger.
yeah,
Just stop.
so hey, so let's dig into that. So Sam, his wife, is also combat medic,
Yep.
and he's technically in charge of her.
Hmm.
I don't. There had to be lots of regulations broken for the
So
SAP.
So first, I'll get to that in just a sec, but I want to point out the first thing that we had like ever really said to each other was it was my first AT. I was brand new,
Mm-hmm.
and there was like the little hot chow line at dinner time, and you had your MREs in the day. So I went through, got my food, and she was walking behind me, and she saw my name tape, and she's like, "Peta, Peta," and I was like, "It's Pettigrew." She's like, "I'm just gonna call you Pettigrew." And so the first thing, like Peter Pettigrew from Harry Potter, who was a rat,
Oh,
but she forgot about that part. So she called me a little like dude in a rat body. Um, and so the first thing like we had really ever like said that we like even remember besides just hi and bye was her making fun of my last name, which she now has. Uh, so it's funny how that
got her.
all works out. Um, But yeah, part of, and maybe it's just a coincidence, but I largely attribute us deploying like together and co-located to I had to extend for the MOB. Well, I sent up my paperwork on like a Tuesday, and come Friday it hadn't gone through yet. And so I get a call at like 9 at night, like, hey, there's a stay guard tomorrow. You need to be at it because your ETS is on Monday. And
Mm-hmm.
so I show up at this stay guard event, and a sergeant major recognized me from the best warrior competition.
Okay.
And so he's like, hey, what do we need to do to keep you in? Granted, I already planned on staying in. I wanted round two of deployment, try to get some like redemption. But I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I tell you what, you put my wife and I on the DMD together for the 125, and I'll give you 6 years today. And
Ooh.
so I just went about like shooting the shit with a couple people I recognized, kind of like forgot I'd even said it. And he just walks up and he's like, it's done. I was like, what do you mean it's done?
Dang.
And he's like, you and your wife, you guys are deploying together.
Dude,
Yeah.
baller move.
So it's crazy how like all these things like just fall into play. Um, and so yeah, then flash forward now, she actually got to the 125 a couple drills before I did because she ended up being she attached, but others were command directed from the 126
Mm-hmm.
initially. Some were brought back, she stayed as well as another medic. Um, and so yeah, from once we started like pre-mob stuff, we were in the 126 together, and then for 125, we reunited after a year. So yeah, we get to Syria, and the first night, Grant. So the whole experience getting in. Um, when I think of C-17 landing, I imagine there's going to be an airstrip there. And it turned out that it's just an open area. And so I didn't have any of the medics put on nods. And so that was fun. We get to our base eventually. We Everyone else has got their nods on because they're all 11 Bravos, and it was getting dark, so they put their nods on, and I was like, nah, like they're just all giddy about it. We're gonna land like at this fortified place clearly because a large aircraft is landing. We wouldn't land in the middle of a field. Um, so that happens. We get dusted by the prop or the jet wash while it takes off.
Yeah.
Get loaded in the back of the Max Pros and Brads and stuff, and off we go. And we get sat in the what was it the KLE room, and after they give everyone the little welcome brief, um, I think it was the XO was like also the Petiprin stay behind, and we're just like, oh, like here we go, we're gonna get like this is the talk we've been waiting for, and
Uh-huh.
we think we're gonna get told like you guys aren't gonna be doing shit in this space, don't even try. And instead it's, all right, guys, so not everyone's ripped out of the roll one yet. So we've got to chew for the two of you for right now. But don't worry, once they're moved out, you guys actually have a room together inside the
Mm-hmm.
roll one, so you guys can be right in there. And yeah, I'll just show you where the room's at, and we'll be good. And we just looked at each other like we're gonna have a room together in Syria. Like that's really a thing that's happening.
Dude, I honestly, most of the people like I talked to where it came up, we were like, I don't know if you got like a lot of people talking crap, but we were like, dude, that's pretty sweet. Like,
Like,
how cool would that be?
yeah,
And also, how challenging would that be at times?
there was maybe like only really one or two times where like I corrected someone in a way that like we laying down at the end of the night. She's like, hey, I don't think you really needed to do it like that. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, but was I wrong? But was I wrong for doing it that way? And she's
Uh-huh.
like, no. And I was like, okay, well then that's how I chose to handle it.
Yeah.
And that was the closest really that we ever like got into any kind of like
You're good at
tension.
keeping it separate.
Yeah. And then we just work really well together at the end of the day. Like
Uh-huh.
her trauma experience and then my just kind of more like willingness to do the army stuff, like the admin
Mm-hmm.
side, handling the evacs, talking with the patient movement people, all like that behind the scenes stuff. Like I took care of that. And
Yeah.
like, she got the roll one, like, like flowing, as smooth as it could. Um,
Yeah.
but what was one of like the times that really stands out? There's two. First one was the CENTCOM sergeant major like made his first rounds of like coming and seeing the base and stuff. And so naturally the VIPs usually like to come to the roll one, oh, what do you do for this? What do you do for that? And so I'm like, hi, I'm
Hmm.
I'm Sergeant Petterprin. This is also Sergeant Petterprin because I didn't want to like say this is my wife and make it sound like this weird
Yeah.
like dynamic. I was like, this is also Sergeant Petterprin, and he's like,
Uh huh.
what? He like, you're both Sergeant Petterprin, and I was like, yeah, we're married. And he's like, no shit. He's like, that's cool as fuck. And so like even the CENTCOM sergeant major was all about it. Um, and then like later on, he like came every time he would visit. He'd like, "Hey, like how are you and the wife?" Like this like super casual conversation you don't think you'd have like in Syria about your
Yeah.
spouse. Um, and then the other time was the ODA. The second batch had just shown up, and one of their colonel or whatever level he was, it was a colonel though, full bird. They're coming around, seeing the roll one, and at this point, we had like all those unicorn posters and like all the paintings and stuff because
Uh huh.
like active duty typically like wants everything to look like, oh yeah, like we're in the army, we're combat medics. And we're just
Yeah.
like we're just here for the vibes. Like
Right.
like we do this like every day. This isn't like something we do and go, and that's the only time we do it. And
Yeah.
so she was facing the other way and didn't see who said it, but they kind of read the sign and they're like, oh, well, what if I come back there? Because it said like no trespassing, violators will be turned into rainbows. And it's like a unicorn. And Sam was like, you better fucking not. And so they just like laughed it off or whatever. And so they leave like a minute or two later. And I was like, babe, so that wasn't just like a full bird. That was like the ODA full bird. And she's like, oh, you seem cool about it. And like that was the end of it.
Oh my gosh, dude. Dude, the stuff that happens in the guard and I guess the army overall, but like especially the guard, but stuff like that. No, man. When I was in the Marine Corps, dude, someone probably would have died.
Oh yeah.
Like seriously. Oh, that's awesome though. I love it.
Yeah.
It's
And
great.
then I mean besides that, like every day we pretty much worked out together. So I think she ended up doing like a total of 770 pounds or something for the 500
Damn.
1,000 pound club stuff. Yeah, we'd
Damn.
run together when the moon dust wasn't filling up your shoes, and I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it was pretty much a paid vacation for us, as fucked up as that is. But I mean, we were
I mean,
what's
I don't
it?
know about a vacation, but
Yeah,
life is simpler there.
I mean, like we were, I ended up getting back paid for my when I got my six out there. She had her five. It was all tax free. Both of us were getting
Yeah.
per diem, so
I know we both got promoted late and got
yeah.
our back pay.
Actually, like the
That was
one of the
nice.
first conversations like we had where I tried to be like informal with you. Do you remember this at all? We were in the talk.
What
So
did you be
so I
talking to
was
me about?
still E5 sergeant type, and you had your six. And at this point, it was like probably like month two. Everyone was starting to kind of like calm down, and I just like, hey Schultz, and you went like that. And I was like, are we really doing this? Like in my head, I was like, are we really still there? Like I can call you mayor and it's fine, but God forbid I call you by your name. And so then I get my six and they're like, oh, hey Dane, what's up? I was like, what the fuck, man? And so then when you get your seven and I first see it, I was like, oh, here we go. Like now we're not cool again. Now I can't even call him BootScoot.
I just didn't know you well enough for that. Yeah. It was I think that one took the last little bit of juice out of me, man.
Yeah.
I'm ready. I'm ready to go home now. So I got, if so, you had to go through that whole COVID experience.
Hmm.
I was transferring from the California Guard to the Nevada Guard when it happened, and I went to like one meeting with the Nevada Guard, and like, okay, this is what we're gonna do, blah blah blah. COVID hits, and I couldn't get a hold of the state transfer coordinator, the sergeant. So then, like, National Guard Bureau in Virginia ends up calling me. Hey, have you heard from him? I'm like, no, thank you for calling. They're like, oh, let's get Gary's answer, blah blah blah. But I missed so much. I missed AT, so I had a bad year and everything. So I would actually be retiring this November. Now to be the November after, but yeah, I'm glad I missed all that COVID stuff. But it would be nice to be out in less than a year right now. But whatever. Yeah. So I would say, we'll close things out here. You've moved up rank pretty quick.
Hmm.
Um, what's your advice to people joining the military and or the Guard? Just your advice to them after doing a couple times in the sand and being a combat medic. What's your advice?
I'd say just don't get stagnant. That's the main thing. Um, Especially if you go as a medic, especially and you want to be like a decent one, just showing
Mm-hmm.
up on drill weekend and doing an IV like once, and a couple people call you doc, you gotta earn it. Like don't get stagnant. Make sure you can pass your PT test when you first show up because I'd at least a third of medics that show up to HHC, like the first one they do, they're like somehow already like can't pass it. Like they just did
Wow.
7 months of basic and AIT, but somehow you show up to home and apparently you drink too many beers when you first get back and now you can't pass the PT test.
Dang.
So that's a big one. And my thing was when I first got to the unit, they sat me and like 5 other specialists down, and they're like, "Hey, you need to have your SSD back then, but your DLC done by
Yeah.
next drill." I did it; none of them else did, and they're like, "Hey, congrats! Dane's the newest specialist, and he's the only one that's eligible for BLC, so he's going." Um, so that's really what kicked it off. Is I just did the minimum and tried to do a little bit more, and yeah, I got my 6 and 5.
Nice. Awesome. What's your plans going forward?
Right now I'm in nursing school, so I'll just be getting my RN though, so I won't be able to commission with it unless I get my BSN in the meantime. But yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
just get my RN for now, and I'm hopefully going to get my 7 within 10. But I do want to finish up, ideally commission, just because you got to have the 10 years as commissioned to get your best 3 for retirement. Um,
Yeah.
so if I do stick it out for the full 20, I'd like that to be as an officer towards the end.
Nice. Yeah, I feel that. I think I was at 13 years in when I got my bachelor's, and I was like, I'm not doing an extra 3
Hmm.
years or 4 years to retire as an officer, so I'll just pass on that. All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for
Um,
having me.
yeah, for everyone listening, don't forget bunker-bros.com. Get the merch. I know Dane had his CCP sticker on his water bottle over
Oh,
there.
yeah. We'll bring that in. And
Yeah.
then shout out to Mam over in Tacoma, Washington, the Odd Outer Brewing. Gotta have
Oh,
that.
yeah. And then, follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And I think we even have a Twitch going on. So check us out at The Real Bunker Bros. And we will see you next time.
Incoming, incoming, incoming.